Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of APA and Chair of the New Urbanism Division, and I'm your webcast moderator. Today, Friday, December 16th, we will hear the presentation, Faith-Based Development, Neighborhood Anchors as Community. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box, or you can call the 1-800 number shown on the screen. And for your content questions related to the presentation, you can type those in the questions box in your GoToWebinar tool panel to the right of your screen. And we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. And I will ask that if you have a question for a particular panelist, that you specify which panelist that is. Okay, on your screen is a list of our sponsors for 2016. Thanks to all of those participating chapters and divisions for making this webcast possible and free to their members. Today in particular, our webcast is sponsored by the Planning the Black Community Division. So thanks to them for that. And we'll hear from Carlton of this division in a few moments. And coming up on your screen is usually where we have a list of our upcoming webcasts, but this is our last webcast of the year. So thanks to everyone. We already have webcasts planned for the beginning of 2017. They will be posted within the next week. Just a quick recap. In 2016, we had 36 chapters and 12 divisions of APA participate. We've been able to process over 50 CM credits, and we've had over 8,000 individuals join our webcast. So thanks to everyone, to your chapters and divisions for making these webcasts possible. To log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, you can visit planning.org and log into your MyAPA account, and then search for CM activities, and there you can either type in the event number or the name of today's webcast, both of which can be found on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And today's session has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing only. We do have recorded webcasts that are available for distance education. For availability of that, just check our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our upcoming sessions. And we are recording today's webcast, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. You can just search Planning Webcast on YouTube. And a PDF will be available after the presentation, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Now I am going to turn it over to kick us off to Carlton Ely. He's a Senior Environmental Protection Specialist at EPA. But before that, I just want to let everyone know one of our panelists, we're having some sound issues with them, and they haven't been able to hear us. So we are working through that. So if you hear them interject at any point, that means that, yay, we can now hear them and they can hear us. So we are working through that. So please, our apologies on that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Carlton to get us started today. Carlton, it's all you.
Thank you, Christine, and I appreciate that introduction, and I suspect that you can now see my screen. If that is correct, Christine, please just confirm.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I received a chat message from the office of Reverend Dr. Floyd Flake indicating that they were on. If they are on, could you please just acknowledge by saying hello?
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Reverend Flake, and thank
Yay!
you, Cynthia.
All right.
And Reverend Flake, just want you to know that if you could get closer to the phone, we'll be able to hear you, and the audience will be able to hear you as well.
All right. Okay, I think we can do that.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Is that
You
better?
yes, it is, sir. You can put yourself on mute in the interim, and I will introduce you after offering some brief opening remarks. Okay. Again, I want to thank you, Christine, for your assistance, and also I want to thank the members of our audience for taking the time to join us today. EPA's Office of Environmental Justice has enjoyed partnering with the Planning and the Black Community Division of the American Planning Association on this webinar series. For almost 36 years, the division has been committed to the professional development of its members, to making great communities happen, as well as elevating important policy issues, including environmental justice. Educational opportunities like this webinar represent one means for connecting with the public, and since March, it has been a pleasure to have practitioners share their knowledge about important topics, including spatial analysis, as well as impact assessment. Today's webinar is the third in a three-part series on equitable development. We created this series for the purpose of elevating solutions that should be part of the dialogue for making communities sustainable and resilient. When EPA launched this series a couple of years ago, it gave us a new opportunity to acquaint the public with a very impressive narrative of environmental justice and problem solving. Thanks to the tireless efforts of researchers and advocates, the creative thinking of planners and architects, and the compelling results of determined community builders, these barriers are coming down, and communities are in fact finding new ways to align environmental justice and planning as complementary quality of life goals. The focus of today's webinar is faith-based development. The objective is to put a spotlight on the important role that faith-based institutions continue to play as community builders. The ethic of stewardship requires accepting the responsibility to be a custodian of the assets in our domain. Faith-based institutions have a long history of filling voids within neighborhoods where they are based. Sometimes their commitment to investing in people has translated into the practice of community development. Faith-based developers are trailblazers with regards to the practice of community building. Many were making a visible difference in communities long before the fiscal levers and incentives that we now appreciate were put in place. Also, the practice of faith-based development has informed a spectrum of activity in the United States, from housing policy to philanthropy. So today's webinar will focus on how faith-based developers continue to serve as stewards of the built environment. Our discussants have distinguished themselves by confronting untenable conditions, by producing sustainable outcomes, and maintaining a commitment to encouraging community parity. And given their very demanding schedules, I just want to state that the Office of Environmental Justice and the Planning and the Black Community Division of the American Planning Association appreciate their willingness to join us and offer remarks today. Our presenters are Reverend Floyd H. Flake, Reverend DeForest Soares, and Reverend Andrew Wilkes. The presenters will wrap up their remarks by 2:00 p.m. approximately, and then we will transition into the question and answer portion of our webinar, which will be led by Christine Dursey. Our first presenter is Reverend Dr. Floyd H. Flake. He is the senior pastor of the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York, and he is the former president of Wilberforce University. He was a member of the United States House of Representatives, serving from 1986 to 1997. Dr. Flake has been a successful community builder and developer. Collectively, the corporations, church administrative offices, schools, and ministries that were established during his tenure as senior pastor comprise one of the largest private sector employers within the borough of Queens, New York. Reverend Flake will speak for roughly 15 minutes, and then we will transition the webinar to our next speaker, who will be Reverend Dr. DeForest Soares. So Reverend Dr. Floyd Flake, I just want to say thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here and glad to be with you again.
Reverend Flake, I'm going on mute. You can start.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, starting now? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so I have been here. This is my 40th year as pastor of Allen Cathedral. And in that time, we have been able to do much for the community, change the community, and shape it in a way that it has an opportunity to survive and create opportunities for other people within our communities. The revenue stream from the beginning, from the tithes and offerings of the people was the method, and we have continued that, and it has worked extremely well for us as this community has been able to sustain itself in a better way than it was when I first came here. Our total assets is about 500 million rather, and the assets have allowed us to be able to continue to create new opportunities as they develop. And so from 1976 until now, we have been able to change this community and make it a community that people are happy to live in and have a sense of commitment to Southeast Queens in a way that was not apparent when I first made my steps into this community. And so we believe that it can happen anywhere, given that if people have a mindset to put their mind not only to do it, but to follow up on it to make it happen through whether other agencies, whether they are government agencies, or whether we have to do it on the ground ourselves. And I think that we have done a pretty good job with that, and therefore Jamaica has become a very strong community and is now in the process of building new communities around much of what the Great Allen Cathedral has started putting on the ground and building up. And so to that, let's go to 1977, I think it is, yeah. We received $11 million grant from HUD, and we built 300 units of Section 202 housing. It has been really a great thing for this community, because the housing in the community earlier was housing that was not what you would call strong, but we started building, and in doing so, we not only started building houses, we followed that with a $1.5 million campaign to build our own Christian school. And that made a difference, because people came to the school, people wanted to be a part of the school, and we had some help from some government sources that worked with us as we launched a $5 million campaign, and we raised the money ourselves and created our own school, and that helped us in terms of bringing people not just into church, but also bringing people into a sense that we had capacity to do things that would better the community as a whole. The schools at that time were not so good. They have gotten better over time. And so we bought sites, and we began constructing. We began constructing the Allen Senior Citizen Center, and that turned out to be a beacon that
Reverend Flake,
shone the light
I
on.
need to
Yeah.
interrupt you for a moment. I'm sorry. Do you have slides that you're planning to advance?
I'm using slides, yeah.
Okay, because we're not seeing that you're forwarding any of the slides. Do you mean to be forwarding them
Oh,
yet? Here we go.
I think we can slide them. Yes, 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 we can do that.
Okay,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So we began constructing the Allen Senior Center on a site that was vacant. Nothing was happening on it. And so we decided that we would take that site, and we were able to purchase the site, and the site helped us to do a great deal of work. We did scattered housing and Allen Senior Housing, and we began to build more as more land became available to us. It was not an easy task because many of the people of the community thought that it was would cause the community to go down, but the opposite was what happened, and that is that the community grew better. A lot more people moved into the community. As they moved into the community became stronger. We purchased a lot on the corner of Linden Boulevard and Merrick Boulevard, and built another school, and that school has survived all of these years. And so we dared to believe that we could make a difference in the community, make the community a better place to live. And it has been really a beacon, a light for the whole community, and is helpful in the process that is going on now as Jamaica Development is developing more, building more, putting more into the community that it had in the past. And so it has worked very well during those years. 1980, we opened the building B of the Allen Senior Citizens, and on 7th Street and Sears Avenue, started construction of the Allen Christian School that December, and the school is still operative. We had a few battles because there were some people who did not enjoy the idea of us building our own school. Turned out to be that we performed better than most of the schools in the community, and it helped this community develop and grow better, and we have been able to do extremely well with the school. In 1981, 82, we closed a $2.5 million mortgage for the Allen Christian School, and so the school continued to survive. The first class centers, Allen Christian School, grades pre-K through 3, and in the basement of the senior center, and that worked extremely well for us. Official opening of the Allen Christian School in the new facility in Linden Boulevard came in September, 1983. And so we were able to continue with the school, with the Christian school, and get support from various entities, including the city government. And so they had confidence enough in us to believe that we would do what we said we would, and we did it. So we purchased 15 stores, 15 stores. And when I say stores, they were not stores that were stores that you could possibly believe in. They were just stores that had been on the block a long time. So we bought the 15 stores on Merrick Boulevard for, what did we pay? $250,000, raised by the Church Women's Day Committee. And the Church Women's Day Committee brought in the money, and we were able to build more housing. And so we started building houses on Merritt Boulevard, and things began to grow. Okay, is our time running out?
No, you're fine.
And we began to grow the community, and the community became a better place, and more and more people began to come to live in this community, and the community has gotten stronger because of that. We were awarded a scholarship, a sponsorship, the South Jamaica Multi-Service Center on Linden Boulevard, and that center was able to give us a place where we had a clinic. We put a clinic in there. We put counseling services in, put in geriatric care, and we did pediatric programs, and that helped us to have a medical facility joining with the hospital. So we felt that the more we did for the community, the better the community would be, the stronger the community will be, and in fact stopped a lot of the crime element that was blocking some of the growth in the community in the past. And so we continued to grow. In 1985, we completed rehabilitation properties at 1112 through 34 Merrick Boulevard, and more units were built. We began with the construction of 11 units of scattered site homes for the first time home buyers, and that was fantastic. People started coming to this community more. We were able to sell all of the homes that we built, and we were able to make the community a place where people began to believe that this was a great community for them to be in. The beginning occupancy of the new homes was for first-time home buyers, and I would say from that time till now, the majority of the people who bought homes from us are still living in those homes. And so we don't have these empty blocks anymore where drug dealers used to hang out. They are a place now where people have a comfort level where they are living. And so it fit perfectly into the plan that we decided we wanted to become. We borrowed $600,000. Rehabilitated a lot of properties, purchased an additional property at 1120 Merrick Boulevard, and we began to let's see, what did we just do next? We did properties at 11th Avenue in Jamaica, and that worked out extremely well. And then then I got elected to Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives, and that became an experience that helped us greatly because my relationship with the federal government grew, and as that relationship grew with some of the other senators, Al D'Amato, President Clinton, and others, we were able to get the airport into the community, and I worked hard on it. President Clinton worked hard on it with me, President and Senator D'Amato. Senator D'Amato worked hard with it, and so we were able to get the air train in Jamaica because there was nothing comparable to that. And it's important because now we have the airplane here. Now we have people who have jobs who could never have had jobs because it just was not available to them. And so the plane to the plane, the plane to the train is what they call it, and it's still alive. And I was favorable and favored by my colleagues to give me the help to help get it done. It's still alive, and it still is operative, and that's working well for us. Let's see, what else? We have, what is that?
FAA.
Okay, so we have this, so Federal Aviation Administration is active in the community, and once again, opportunity to create a number of jobs that would not ever have come to this community, and we're still doing very well with it. The trains are doing well, and everything is functioning in pretty good order. What else did we do? We engaged with the college. Is that next? Okay, York College. Okay, we decided to build a college here in the community, and I was a part of that. And it is now a full-time college and doing extremely well. And so we believe that having the college here has helped the community as a whole and helped us to do many more things that we would not have been able to do if we had not. And so that has worked out extremely well for us as well. 1987.
Reverend Blake, I just need to announce that you have 3 minutes left.
Okay, 3 minutes. Okay, so we leased land again, Southeast Queens, and the Allen Transportation Corporation, it's a bus company. We also got Boulevard Jamaica Hospital is leasing land from us, so that revenue comes back into the church and has been beneficial because more than having money coming into the church, it helps the hospital as well, and the hospital has done extremely well during the course of its tenure here. We completed some projects. I'm almost finished. Other completed projects: Greater Allen Affordable Housing. What is this? We did, we call it Allen by the Bay, out in Far Rockaway, and it is affordable housing, and it is fully occupied. We don't have any tenants, any buildings that are not occupied, and they are doing extremely well. The last, what do we have here?
Just trying to skip through some of the slides because we're running out of time.
If we see some of the slides of these older buildings, do you see some older raggedy looking buildings? Those were just buildings that were just standing. That's where the drug dealers and others used to hang out. We bought all of that, and now we have, on that site, we have open housing. We have open housing.
We have completed projects, and now
we have completed projects, and those are fully occupied today and are doing well. We've just put a restaurant into one of those buildings, and it is doing well. And so we have found ways to bring income into the community and make it a community that people are very, very comfortable with. We opened a shelter for homeless families, and it is still operative, and they are working extremely well and has been in operation for quite a long time. Okay, I think we're near the ending. If you have an opportunity for questions, I'm ready to take them. And
we'll do that afterwards.
You know, and continue with what we're doing.
Thank you, Dr. Flake. We're going to take questions at the end of the three presentations, but we do appreciate you for joining us and for taking the time to share the level and the scale of work that you have been able to do in Jamaica, Queens, New York. So again, thank you again, Dr. Flake.
Yeah, thank you again for the invitation and for all that we have been able to do together over the years. God bless you.
Our second presenter is Reverend Dr. DeForest B. Soares, Jr. Dr. Soares is the senior pastor of the First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens in Somerset, New Jersey. His pastoral ministry focuses on spiritual growth, educational excellence, economic empowerment, and faith-based community development. Dr. Soares served as New Jersey's 30th Secretary of State from 1999 to 2002. He was the recipient of Plan Smart New Jersey's Regional Equity Excellence Award in recognition of his community leadership in 2009. Finally, I just want to state that Dr. Soares is a major proponent for improving financial literacy. His work has been featured on news specials including CNN, and he is the author of D-Free, Breaking Free from Financial Slavery, which was published in February 2011. Dr. Soares, if you could unmute your line, and we just want to say thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Brother Ely, and thank you to the American Planning Association, and thank you to Dr. Flake, not only for his profound presentation, but before I begin, I would be remiss if I did not say that my work began by my taking the leadership from my neighborhood and my church to Queens, New York in 1992. As we were developing our plan and our vision for our neighborhood, we wanted to follow a core principle, and that is this: the only way you can produce success is to study success. Often we become fixed in our minds on failure, and all we can see is failure. And as I approached the neighborhood that I'll describe momentarily, I realized that the people in the neighborhood needed to see someone who had done what we were trying to convince them to do. So we chartered a bus. In fact, I paid
Reverend,
for the bus.
can I please interrupt you for a moment? Could you please, you should have a pop-up message that says that you've been made the presenter. Could you please click yes to show your screen?
Pop up and say yes. Okay, show my screen. All right. Can you see it now?
Yes, we need you to pull up your PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll do that also.
You have a lovely background.
Did you hear what I said?
Yes.
Good. All right. Good. You didn't need the PowerPoint for what I just said.
Oh, okay.
I chartered a bus and took about 35 community leaders from Central New Jersey, which is where First Baptist is located, over to Queens, New York, to see Reverend Flake, with whom I had been acquainted for years. I met Dr. Flake in the 1970s, and we've been friends since that time till now. What that principle really indicates is that this presentation and others remind us that if you want success, particularly in spaces that are unprecedented, then you need to study success. One of the challenges we have in the country is that we focus so much on problems that we don't spend enough time discussing solutions. So I'm happy to be a part of this presentation. I am in Somerset, New Jersey, which is one of the wealthiest counties in the country, but which also contains some of the poorest people in New Jersey. Somerset County is where the church is located. When you see this map is the neighborhood that we claimed as our focus. Some people would call it technically a catchment area, others would call it theologically their Jerusalem. We decided as a church in 1990 that we were going to leverage the spiritual, financial, and human resources of our congregation to do here what Allen AME Church had done in Queens, New York, and that is to bring about revitalization. We had the unenviable location of being on the border of two separate counties and 2 separate municipalities. And so if you see on the map on the left, you have Franklin Township. That's Somerset County, which is a wealthy county controlled by Republicans. And then on the right side, you see New Brunswick, which is in Middlesex County, which is controlled by Democrats. And the line that separates the two is Route 27, which is a state highway, which meant that in order to envision and then subsequently execute a strategy to bring about any kind of renewal in this area, we had to deal with Republicans on the municipal and county level in Somerset, Democrats on the municipal and county level in Middlesex, and then the State Department of Transportation. So I always tell people, if I put a sign on my front lawn, I have to get permission from 5 levels of government. My church is actually in Franklin Township on the Somerset side. My parking lot, our health clinic, and much of our housing is on the New Brunswick side. One of the challenges we had when you look at this map is that we were the only ones who saw this as a neighborhood. Right behind our church is public housing in Somerset County. On the other side of the highway is public housing in Middlesex County. And for the decades prior to my arrival, there were rival gangs in each of the public housing units who would use the church's parking lot as a battleground every weekend. And so to bring about economic renewal and revitalization required, in the first instance, forging a sense of neighborhood among people who really saw themselves as being something other than partners in development. So we started in 1993 a community development corporation. I became the pastor of a church that had been formed in 1937, and that church in 1990 hired me to be their 3rd pastor. And when I became the pastor, the church began a strategic planning process, the outcome of which was to form a separate 501c3 called the First Baptist Community Development Corporation, which was later renamed the Central Jersey Community Development Corporation. And our mission was to rebuild our neighborhood one family at a time. In terms of what we found, an ethnically diverse neighborhood, approximately 47% white, 45% black, and the rest was Asian and Hispanic. The median age was 30 years old, and among those persons 45 and older, we had among those 18 and over, we had a 45% high school dropout rate. The oldest housing stock in the neighborhood, highest crime rate in the region. We are 1 mile south of Johnson & Johnson World Headquarters, 1 mile southeast from Rutgers University, but the violence and the crime proliferated this neighborhood because there were natural boundaries that separated the revitalization that was happening in downtown New Brunswick from the disinvestment in our neighborhood, and the natural boundary there was a cemetery. When we looked at how to identify our neighborhood, since there were no there were no formal designations of this area as a neighborhood, we rented a helicopter and went up above the church. And when you go up high enough above the church, you could see to the north a cemetery, to the east railroad tracks, to the west a commercial district, and to the south the municipal boundary. And so we named that the Renaissance neighborhood and assumed that the dynamics within those boundaries constituted not only grounds for major initiative, but also opportunity for major development. The drug activity was prolific. We had deserted industrial space. And so as we looked at the neighborhood, we saw the challenges, but we saw all of these characteristics as an opportunity for the church, again, to leverage its resources to bring about a change, particularly since the congregation, which I inherited at about 800 strong, had grown in 3 years to about 2,000 strong, and the congregation therefore have outgrown the church facility and had no desire to move out of the neighborhood. And so the only thing we could do before we could build a new church was to build an entire neighborhood. So we made some strategic decisions. One, the church leadership made a formal commitment to improve the neighborhood surrounding the church. We developed a strategic plan for the church, which included the creation of the 501c3. We created set parameters for creating a governance body. And our CDC, Community Development Corporation, included people from the church and representatives from the neighborhood. And we made a real commitment to protect the neighborhood from gentrification. Gentrification caused by our work, or gentrification that would be caused by outside investors who would come and make the neighborhood unaffordable since it was ripe for investment. Our strategy was to identify and build upon existing assets, and the chief assets were key neighborhood residents who in many instances were unlettered, they were uncertified, they were just natural leaders in the neighborhood, men and women who had been here all of their lives, who were credible, who believed that the neighborhood could be better, and who were willing to partner with us to give us the kind of credibility we needed on the ground to ensure that this was a bottom-up movement and not a top-down strategy. We did public hearings, we did door-to-door surveys. We wanted to make sure that the residents and that the business owners and that the employees in the area were not just stakeholders technically, but stakeholders functionally. And of course, we wanted to ensure that the residents would benefit from the revitalization plans that we developed. Initially, and you know, when Floyd and I and others talk about community development, we are normally asked about the big projects, you know, the tax credit deals, the commercial developments, the joint ventures. But what was important here, as well as in Queens or wherever we work, is to realize that people need hope. People need symbols of success. People need to know that there is a credible, integral agency that's working on their behalf, because we've seen in so many urban areas dislocation as a consequence of urban renewal. In fact, you know, the nickname for urban renewal among most of us is urban removal. And so we did not start with buying property. We did not start with the developments that you'll see momentarily. We started with what we call low-hanging fruit. We facilitated with the State Department of Transportation the installation of a traffic light at a corner where kids were killed on a regular basis. We bought some woods where drug dealers were using as an open-air drugstore. We shut down an illegally run strip club. We created a neighborhood association, partnered with local government. And again, the principles we followed were people-driven approach, credibility, spirit of respect and value for people, buy-in from local government, etc. I'm going to skip this page. This has to do with the services that we provided to the people, pursuant to an understanding that you have to do human development before you do brick and mortar development. Otherwise, you are creating a scenario for displacement. So we completed an abandoned development project to produce 124 condos for first-time home buyers. We attracted over $300 million worth of private investment to the neighborhood. We lobbied successfully to get a $180 million new high school in the neighborhood. We did a tax credit deal, 64 units of affordable senior housing. We brought in a faith-based hospital into one of our redeveloped properties to provide primary care services. We now serve 120 pregnant women every day through this facility. We had to have the state change the transportation system to give people access to jobs and to health care. And we worked with the police to change policing strategies. So this is the new sanctuary we built. This was a $23 million worship facility. This is the mixed-use senior center, 64 units of affordable senior housing, 5 units designated for homeless veterans, and 18,000 square feet of commercial space leased to the county for their social services department. This is the public housing that we pretty much took over politically and tore down and rebuilt without any displacement. And this is the 124 unit condominium development that was all purchased by first-time home buyers. I think my time is up.
Thank you, Dr. Soares. We really appreciate that presentation, and thank you also for getting us back on time. And we are looking forward to asking you a number of questions at the end of the webinar. Reverend Andrew Wilkes is our third presenter. Reverend Wilkes is the Executive Director of the Drum Major Institute, and he is a contributor to the Huffington Post. Reverend Wilkes has built his career on the pillars of encouraging economic development and economic justice. Reverend Wilkes was a senior grants manager at the American Red Cross. He oversaw a $45 million budget for recovery efforts in New York State and Connecticut following Hurricane Sandy. Reverend Wilkes was the Faith and Community Relations Associate at Habitat for Humanity in New York City, and he was responsible for interfacing with 140 faith communities. Currently, Reverend Wilkes serves as an associate pastor for social justice and young adults at the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York. Reverend Wilkes, we want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. And Reverend Wilkes, currently you are muted. We need for you to unmute your line, and we also need for you to project your slides for the benefit of the audience. Reverend Wilkes, if you're on, we still need for you to unmute your line.
And that's through GoToWebinar, not on your phone, please. That's the green square with a white microphone icon.
While we're waiting for Reverend Wilkes to unmute his phone, Christine, is there a question that you may have received in the interim from the audience that we can elevate for either Reverend Flake or for Reverend Soares?
Yes, we have several actually. And I fear that there might be an internet connection problem because Reverend Wilkes looks like he disappeared off my system. So we'll just kind of go through some questions and see where that takes us. The first question is for Reverend Flake. Are all of the church-owned properties tax exempt?
All of our properties tax exempt. I think at this point they are. Are we tax exempt? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes.
Okay, great. Another question for you. Were any environmental assessments required prior to building, or were there any requirements of proof of assessments which showed that there were no environmental impacts on the properties?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, that was one of the hardest parts of the challenge. But I worked well with the city government, and they helped me to solve that problem.
Okay. Let's see.
Let me just mention that all of our properties are tax exempt, but all of our deals included pilots, payment in lieu of taxes. So other than the church itself, all of our other properties pay taxes, but the taxes are fixed through a pilot to ensure long-term sustainability.
Thank you, Reverend Flake, and thank you, Reverend Soares. It looks like we have Andrew Wilkes back on. will confirm. Reverend Wilkes, are you there?
It looks like he's still trying to log back in. I don't think he has his sound yet.
Okay. Is there another question you'd like to elevate, Christine?
Sure, we can ask another one. Let's see. This could be for, I guess, for Reverend Flake. How large is the congregation that helped these projects in the community? Was it one or was it several?
At the beginning, it was pretty small. As a matter of fact, you know, I came into the community new, and some of the folk who had seen these properties for years and driven by them claimed them as their own, and my challenge was to make them understand that just having property that is standing barren and drug dealers selling drugs on them was not good for the community. So we had some battles because some of the old-timers who were there actually came and stood on my desk and threatened me if I built these homes that they were going to tear them down. But I basically felt that this is what God had sent me here for, and I had just gotten there as a new pastor, and I was going to do what I thought was best for the community. And then the community opened up a bit, and over time I got elected, and that took all of that out of it. They started to push me and say, you know, that who I wasn't, because I was young. I mean, I came here very young, and so that's the way it is.
Thank you.
Hi, this is
Reverend Wilkes, is that you?
This is me. I somehow got knocked off, but I'm back on now.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
So thank you, and we're going to turn it over to you, Reverend Wilkes. So if you could please, you received a pop-up that says that you've been made the presenter. If you could please show your screen now. Wonderful. Yes, from beginning. Perfect. Thank you. This is fun, isn't it? This is a we're getting this done. Perfect.
It is indeed. All right. Excited to be with everyone. Thanks to Pastor Floyd and also Pastor Story for phenomenal presentations. I have the pleasure of serving with Pastor Floyd at the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York. And most relevant here, as Carlton mentioned, I serve as Allen Social Justice Director. Also in that capacity, I've had the chance to really see what community development for faith communities looks like in the context of disaster. And so I'm going to direct my remarks in particular to those scenarios as we move through this part of the presentation. What I particularly want to lift up is that faith communities have a really important role to play, not only in terms of meeting supply-demand gaps, where there's not enough housing and faith communities come online to bring more housing, or there's not enough workforce development opportunities, and so you get more of those online. I also want to particularly address my remarks to how faith communities are able to aggregate policy preferences and then express those to the public sector in a way that enables more transformative work to happen, because congregants as well as community members are able to get their word out to the community. So what I want to draw you all's attention to is something which took place while I was at Habitat for Humanity. In 2002, while New York State was still regaining its stride following the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009, then Governor Cuomo released an executive budget that zeroed out funding for foreclosure prevention. At the time, I was tasked with working rather mobilizing 140 faith communities across New York to express a policy preference to see that kind of funding restored. And to give you a context, foreclosure prevention funding is critical to renegotiating the terms of a mortgage that may, wherein a homeowner may have fallen behind, and for helping homeowners receive assistance for legal aid and also housing counseling assistance. And just to give you all a picture of what we're talking about, in 2010, the New York Daily News reported that there were 98 foreclosed properties within a 4-block stretch of South Jamaica, which is one of the neighborhoods where Greater Allen Cathedral is located. And so in terms of understanding how critical this funding is and the corresponding need to lift up a policy vision that responds to it, that's what we're talking about. And so Southeast Queens is one of the hardest hit areas in terms of dealing with foreclosure prevention. What was able to happen following this particular moment is that having a bit of technical difficulties, and so I'm backing out to move to another slide.
Try right-clicking your mouse.
Right-clicking my mouse.
And then hit next.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So after a successful Blitz campaign, we found out that the January budget release, there was no funding for foreclosure prevention services. We were in the position of having to engage 40 congregations in less than 6 weeks in order to secure, ultimately this was successful, $60 million in 3 years in foreclosure prevention funding. And so what this meant is that struggling families who were unable to negotiate on their own were able to receive the assistance of intermediaries who were effectively able to be the go-betweens in relation to a struggling household and a bank in order to recalibrate the terms of what their mortgage is. The funding came through a then recently executed New York State bank settlement, which came through the Attorney General's office. And while $60 million may not seem like a lot of money, for families who didn't have any other source of revenue to turn to, this enabled frontline service providers to really step up to the plate and make the difference for families who needed a champion for their interests. And so I lift up faith communities in this regard, because when you have parishioners who are looking for a trusted institution to voice their concerns to legislators, to agency officials, and to chief executives at the state level, many homeowners look to faith communities not only as a source of spiritual support, but as Pastor Soares and Flake have already indicated, as a source of societal support to convey their interests on a much more broader wavelength. So the takeaway is that faith communities can help facilitate broader community uplift through an organizing strategy which ensures that the public sector supports programs which meet critical needs in our communities. The next example that I want to move to touches on the role of faith communities providing community development service in the context of Superstorm Sandy. You may recall that Superstorm Sandy was the biggest natural disaster to hit the East Coast in about 25 years. And Sandy, just to refresh your memory, caused $62 billion in damage, which was effectively a Hurricane Katrina in the northeastern part of the United States. And at the worst part of the storm's impact, 7.5 million people without power, and the storm brought water levels 14 feet above the average low tide. So we're talking about a catastrophe not only of enormous natural proportions, but it created a huge political crisis. The slide which is before you now is from FEMA, and it shows spatially where Hurricane Sandy had its impact. The slide may be tough for you to read what all of the coding means, but I simply want to direct you towards the purple area, which is where both Greater Allen Cathedral is located, as well as Pastor Soares Church for Somerset of Lincoln Gardens is also in the coastal area of New Jersey, which is in the purple, which means that this is the area which was most heavily impacted by Superstorm Sandy. So this just gives you a context for what we're dealing with. So in the immediate aftermath of the storm, you have communities who are dealing with incredibly high water levels. As you can see in this next slide, NYPD cars completely submerged underwater, small business owners completely shuttered facilities, seniors living in high-rise properties having difficulties getting up to the front, elevators not working, boilers incredibly damaged, brown, brackish water coming through when people are trying to wash the dishes. A really tough moment for people to cope with. So in the immediate aftermath of a natural disaster like Sandy, what happens is that disaster relief takes place. And you have organizations like the Red Cross and other relief agencies that distribute blankets, get food, and other important personal hygiene items out to communities as quickly as possible. Following that disaster recovery period, though, there's a disaster relief period. There's what's called a disaster recovery period, which takes place from 2 to 5 years after the incident takes place. And I mention that to give you context, because what took place due to Superstorm Sandy hitting New York and New Jersey in 2002 is very much an event that's still ongoing with us. And so soon after Superstorm Sandy hit, I began working with the American Red Cross, where I managed a $45 million grant portfolio for Sandy recovery in New York State and Connecticut. And I want to highlight that faith communities played a tremendously pivotal role in community development in the context of disaster. They were uniquely able to mobilize skilled volunteers as well as professionals who are in congregations as well as denominations, the latter being the overarching body that convenes different local congregations at a national level. And they were able to provide critical assistance in terms of mold remediation, housing repair, fundraising, and distributing emergency financial assistance. Some of those key partners in this work, for those of you who may not be familiar with them, I've included on this slide. UMCOR was a critical partner in terms of getting out emergency financial assistance, and they're particularly strong in the eastern and midwestern parts of the United States. Southern Baptist Disaster Relief, Presbyterian Disaster Awareness stepped up and really housed a number of volunteers, particularly where Great Island Cathedral is located in Jamaica. They did a great job there. And Catholic Charities was also a pivotal partner. One organization I want to highlight in particular is the New York Disaster Interfaith Services. And again, this part of the presentation is really to show how faith communities, when aggregated together, can do really important and transformative work, including voluntary housing. They were able to bring 20 congregations across the city to house 2,000 plus volunteers throughout the 5 boroughs. There was also a really unique partnership between, and it's always interesting when you bring a number of different city agencies together with faith communities. You have to make sure that there's a low ego, high impact ethos which governs the relationship. So there was a temporary disaster assistance program which came out of New York City's Housing Preservation and Development Shop along with NIDIS, and this enabled folks who were dislocated from their homes due to Sandy to have a place to live in a hotel over the span of 1 year, in some cases as long as 2 years, to make sure that they could keep the kids going to school, reconnect with their jobs, and otherwise have a sense of normalcy. You also see a critical role in terms of distributing emergency financial assistance through what are called unmet needs roundtables. A brief word about that. Unmet needs roundtables are a particular example of how faith communities provide a critical impact, because when disaster happens, families are often completely disoriented and are looking to not only social workers and psychiatrists, but folks are really looking to their pastor, to their rabbi, to their imam, etc., to give them a sense of their bearings back, and also to give them a sense of what their next steps are in terms of moving forward. So churches were really critical and helping us to do an inventory on a family-by-family level of who needs disaster assistance and in what amount in terms of rent, in terms of utilities, in terms of medicine, the bare essentials, again, 2-3 years after the storm. The last part of the presentation that I want to draw your attention to is the role of community organizing in the wake of Superstorm Sandy. Greater Allen Cathedral, in concert with our partner Faith in New York, played a really on-the-ground role in terms of making sure that resources were equitably used following the disaster recovery period of Sandy. A couple years ago in July, we held a citywide public forum that included over 1,600 people in attendance, including the mayor's office, relevant city agencies, and local council members. And the basic message is this. We wanted to see equitable development in terms of funding streams that were coming through HUD, Community Development Block Grant funds that are earmarked for disaster relief. We wanted to see those used in such a way that built in hiring standards that gave a measure of preference to folks who were locally impacted in Sandy-affected communities, for those who are living in coastal areas. And we also wanted to see Sandy be used to provide an opportunity for community members to have meaningful input into shaping a program and not just input in terms of assessing how the programs are being executed without having any input on the front end of the design of the program. This is just a brief article about a family who was in the sanctuary of the cathedral from the citywide assembly that we were able to do. And this last slide gives you a sense of some of what we were able to accomplish. And again, I want to make sure I'm painting a full context. This is a result of over 2 to 3 years of organizing in which Allen Social Justice Ministry and other partners played a critical role, but faith communities and congregations in particular helped to get some of these things accomplished. We were able to secure local hiring standards that impacted contracts covering upwards of $750 million worth of construction work, procurement contracts that secure really reliable workforce development tracks for folks affected by the storm to have secure employment. We were able to get the city to commit to 20% of work going to residents living in Sandy impacted areas. And the last 2 points that I want to highlight are these. Through the work of communities of faith coming together as anchor institutions, we were able to get HUD to make an unprecedented commitment to use community development block grant funds for disaster recovery to also include the goal of workforce development and training. And this came about, again, as a result of faith communities aggregating and amplifying policy preferences of what equitable development looks like in a post-disaster context. And so when you take all of what the 3 presenters are saying, you have not only faith communities closing the supply-demand gap through community development corporations and incredibly innovative work on the direct supply end, you also have congregations and communities of faith closing the supply-demand gap between needed services and programs and them not being there through aggregating and amplifying policy preferences so that the public sector can step up to the plate and do more of its work. And that concludes my presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Reverend Wilkes. We really appreciate you taking the time to share, and I know that you have to open up one slide for the question and answer segment and project it for the benefit of the audience. But again, I want to offer my thanks to Reverend Andrew Wilkes, to Reverend DeForest Soares, and to Reverend Floyd Flake for joining us today. All 3 of them showed work of varying scales from the impact that faith-based developers have at the neighborhood level to even showing or demonstrating the impact that faith-based institutions have on the policies that guide how we respond to natural disasters. We are about to start the question and answer segment. We have roughly 18 minutes before the webinar concludes. And I just want to wrap up by thanking Christine Dursey, as well as the Planning Webcast Series Consortium, for hosting this webinar series and for their support over the span of the year. And so with that, Christine, I think you now have the controls have been shifted back over to you, and we will now open it up for the moderation of the questions during the question and answer period.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there are quite a few questions, so we'll just kind of try to get through as many of them as we can. And if we didn't get your question answered, you can feel free to contact our panelists, and you can see their information on the page. Let's go back to Reverend Soares. Have there been any conflicts between the mission of the church versus what the 501c3 may be presenting or wanting to move forward with?
Thank you. That's a good question. The mission of the church includes impacting the neighborhood. The reality is that we formed 5 separate nonprofit corporations for many purposes. Number one, our core Community Development Corporation was enhanced by having both members of the church and members of the community. In that sense, we calculated that the church needed partnerships outside of the church to impact the community within which the church was located. In the second instance, as all developers, we found that the separation of assets was a prudent business strategy, and so in that sense, the church was enhanced. But in terms of the core mission of the church, and if we look at the mission of the church, including growth and vitality, we've taken in now over 6,000 new members since I've been here, and there are 3 reasons people give for joining our church consistently, one of which is the focus of the church on the community. And so we have found, just as the cathedral in Queens has found under Dr. Flake, that when churches are actively engaged in community, it makes the church more attractive to people looking for a church.
Thank you. This next question is for everyone. In your particular projects, was there an overall vision cast, or was the development sort of in a piecemeal fashion?
Well, and I think from Alan's perspective, it was a vision cast based on what we inherited coming into the community. Drug dealers had occupied so much of the community. People were moving out, and many people afraid to stay. And so for us, it was a whole opportunity to change a community that was once a great community back into a great community.
Likewise, ours was a formal vision. It was an interactive planning process with the community, which took 18 months. And it was such a formal vision that both municipalities adopted our community plan as a part of the municipal master plan.
Yeah. And for me, it was doing through the city departments, coming to know them and making them know me and bringing them out to see what the community looked like. And at that time, Mayor Dinkins, I think, is the one who started, and others, and other mayors have always followed. As I ask for things for that community, they have always responded to it. So the connections with high-level government officials can be good if you work with them and not try to override them. That's the thing. I mean, you just have to know that they have an entity that they have to take care of, but they also have a responsibility for the community as a whole.
Right. So to just add to what Dr. Flake says, traditionally, as a black pastor, I was trained to have as a default strategy protest and proclamation. By the time I arrived at this mission, neither protest nor mere proclamation was going to change this. I had to become a developer, not just a protester.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
If I can just add to Pastor Story's point, I think moving from the protest strategy requires, when you enter the policy arena, to have a clear vision of what the solution would be, so that you sit down at the table as a negotiator and not solely as an agitator. And that was one of the ways that we were able to see some success in terms of foreclosure prevention and the still ongoing Sandy recovery work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Thank you. This is for all three of you again. How do you suggest that those working on environmental justice projects connect with and gain support from community members whose first priority usually is the crime and poverty? Not downplaying those, but when you're specifically wanting to address environmental justice.
But crime is an element that kind of steps in sometimes and blocks things. I remember when we were in our early stages, and crime was so prevalent, and the kids couldn't even get to street to get to school, and it was just a difficult situation. But that's where you come to the point of trying to get other people engaged to the degree that understanding that their schools, if their schools are working properly, it helps to make the communities much stronger. And once we started stopping a lot of the crime elements, it made things work much better. And as the crime elements began to move, the community became a greater place to be.
This is Carlton Ely from EPA's Office of Environmental Justice. If I could interject, I also want to acknowledge that there are a number of environmental justice organizations who are also taking on the role of being community builders, whether it be the work of the Environmental Health Coalition in San Diego, California, or even the work of State Representative Harold Mitchell, who is in Spartanburg, South Carolina. The reason why I mention them, and there are many others, is because when it comes to trying to alleviate the problems within communities that may have environmental justice concerns, what we often find is that there are a number of issues that are commingled. If a community is underserved and it is lower income, you may find not only the presence of the disproportionate burden of pollution, but you will also find that there are other challenges, such as the fact that there may be certain criminal activity or other unwanted activity in such places. And what many of these community builders who work on or specialize in issues of environmental justice realize is that it's not about trying to focus on one or the other, but instead realizing that if you're going to encourage a holistic strategy, you have to be savvy enough in order to address all of it. And so I just wanted to share that briefly, given the nature of the question in terms of do you focus on one or the other. The reality is that many realize that these issues are commingled and they're connected to one another, and so you have to be prepared to work on all of it, although you may set certain priorities in terms of how you proceed.
No, that's true. I mean, I was going to talk about this holistic model. You know, in most instances, unless you are dealing with like water in Flint, Michigan, traditional environmental issues are more policy level, longer term, protracted projects. And it's therefore incumbent upon communities to develop the internal capacity to play both defense and offense, and to do both short-term and long-term. And to that end, environmental justice organizations and advocates need relationships with people that address the other issues. Otherwise, those persons will see the issue as, again, unless you're in Flint dealing with water, which was like immediate in the bathroom, will see you as being secondary and long-term, while they're wrestling with people firing gunshots into their windows, like on the weekend. So I think Carlton's exactly right. It's making sure the environmental justice issue functions within the context of a larger vision for the community, being led by internal indigenous leadership and institutions that have real capacity.
That's true.
Just want to hop in there. This is Reverend Andrew Wilk. Just last night at the cathedral, we had a couple of our partners there talking about the importance of environmental justice. We had some folks from the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, as well as from Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice, which has been doing incredible organizing for decades in the South Bronx. And a part of what we've come to see in New York City is that, to pick one area, commercial waste, for instance, waste transfer stations are concentrated in 3 communities, one of which is Southeast Queens, where Great Island Cathedral is located. And so there's a real need to have faith communities serve as conveners of environmental justice organizations, because, again, we're some of the most trusted institutions in neighborhoods that have seen a lot of disinvestment and sometimes over-policing and these sorts of things. And so when you have faith communities like the cathedral, like Pastor Soares' church, which can convene environmental justice organizations to the table, we're able to be a part of these long-term conversations, to have the community put forth a visioning strategy, and ultimately sit down at the table with a vision for, in the case of this commercial waste example, to have each part of the city come up with a more equitable strategy for dealing with its own waste, rather than concentrating the waste in communities where they're disproportionately low-income folks of color living.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This is a quick question, and I think I might be able to even answer it. At the very beginning of the presentation, 202 housing was mentioned, and I believe that that's public housing or assistance for senior citizens. Can someone confirm that?
Yeah, Section 202 housing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have. I think we have 2,300 projects. How many projects we got in here? 300 units. Yeah. And they are. We use that as housing for seniors because they are oftentimes left out and have nowhere to go when they get aged, and their property, they cannot keep their upkeep of their properties. So we did in Rockaway, we put in 17, what did we put in there? $11 million, a grant from HUD. And so we built houses and then added a school to that particular project because the schools out there were not working properly. So we felt that it was necessary. If we were going to put those people out there, they are grandparents and they needed some kind of help. The best way to do it was to put a school in there where the children would get a good education in a place which was not providing the kind of education that should have been provided in a community.
Okay, thank you. This next question, Carlton, if you're hanging around, maybe you'd be a good person to start with this. This is pretty interesting. Is there a policy definition of environmental justice?
Yes, there is a definition for environmental justice. I just want to point out that EPA does have an environmental justice website. The address for the agency is epa.gov environmental justice. And in terms of the standard definition for environmental justice, is it speaks to the issue of course, of the importance of encouraging fairness and acknowledging the fact that there are instances in which persons, whether they are lower income or people of color, have sometimes been bearing the disproportionate burden of pollution. And so the goal of environmental justice is to focus on strategies and solutions that help to correct that disproportionate impact. That is not the definition verbatim, but I did want to point out where you can go specifically for that definition. I mean, the definition is in many reports that have been produced by the EPA. The definition is on EPA's website on the environmental justice page. And if you have any additional questions, you may also contact me, although my email address is not referenced on the slide. My email address is ely.carlton@epa.gov.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. There is a movement going across the country of trying to connect planning with public health. And there also happens to be an incredible heroin epidemic, particularly strong in the Midwest. And the question is, where can the projects that you're working on, where can your community fit into helping with this terrible heroin epidemic? And what can be done from your perspective and from the perspective of development? And this is for any of you.
I'm understanding the West Coast, is it that's having severe problems with it, I think? Am I correct?
It might be. I know in particular the Midwest is having a horrific time right now.
I really can't speak on it because I just don't know much about it. That's the best way I can put it. This is Reverend Flake.
Okay.
I can't speak on it because I don't know enough about it.
I think what we have to do as a society is identify best practices, meaning programs that really work.
That's right.
And then understand and dissect the principles behind those programs and replicate them. You know, we treated drugs in a very discriminatory way as crime more than a health problem. And until we understand how to help people who are addicted to heroin and cocaine, then we'll just lock them up and throw away the key, and the problem will get worse. And then if you're black or Hispanic, you get locked up longer for less.
That's true.
Okay, thank you. Carlton, could you please repeat your email address?
Yes, my email address is, again, ely.carlton@epa.gov, and my last name is spelled E-L-E-Y. So that's ely.carlton@epa.gov. And for the benefit of the listening audience, the definition of environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, and income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. That is the definition of environmental justice.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, it is 2:30 Eastern Time, so it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you, Carlton Ely, and for the APA Planning in the Black Community Division, and our panelists today, Reverend Soares, Reverend Flake, and Reverend Wilkes, for joining us. And thanks everyone for dealing with some of our technical issues. We appreciate your patience on that. This webcast is recorded. You can find it on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast. It'll be up probably Monday. And I'm going to gather up all the PowerPoints from our presenters today and post them on our webpage, ohioplanning.org/planning. planning webcast. And you can get more information on all of our upcoming sessions on our webpage as well. Again, thanks everyone. Thanks to our panelists. Thank you, Carlton. And we will talk to everyone in 2017. Thanks. Have a great one.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you. Okay.
Take care, everyone.